I remember, you call it the famous Baltimore call, right?
The famous Baltimore call. And in your most recent book, you tell the story by that name.
Yep. Well, that's what you've been calling it all these years. So it was 1988 or 89. I think it was 89.
I remember it well.
I remember calling you from, my wife and I were living with my parents at that time. We were fairly newlywed. And I remember calling you from the attic where my parents had a finished attic, and that's where Debbie and I were staying. And yeah, I remember just calling you and saying, Doc, I'm out sharing my faith and these people are raising objections and I don't know how to answer it. And it's like, look, what about all the, a lot of scholars don't think Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John wrote the Gospels. And if they didn't know who wrote them, well, then how can we know we can trust those Gospels? And this is really rocking my faith. And you said?
And I said, pretty shortly, I said, Mike, was Jesus Christ raised from the dead?
And I said, well, yeah.
Yeah, like, how is that relevant?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, okay, Mike, then if Jesus Christ was raised from the dead, isn't that the answer to your questions? And
how's that the answer to my question?
So we explained it a little bit. We said, see, even today, Mike, we should maybe tell people, we go on today as the upshot of that conversation, and we say to people asking questions, even if there's errors here or there, and I tell people, you know where I teach, and you know what statement of faith I sign, but if I can't explain everything in the Bible, that doesn't mean I don't have data for the resurrection. And I still believe there's strong data for the gospel, i.e. the deity, death, and resurrection of Christ, the gospel data, and the need for faith. So that's how it started back then. And I said, well, are you sure about those things? Deity, death, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so...
Yeah. And I said, well, yeah,
what was the answer? Yes, but?
Yeah, if the deity and resurrection of Jesus are correct, then Christianity is true. But what about the contradictions that we cite? And you said?
Yeah, and I said, Mike, well, I explained the minimal facts to you. It's a minimal fact argument. I can do it if you want, but the minimal fact argument. And basically my point was, if this minimal number of facts, and both of us have used anywhere from like 3 to 6 facts, and if those are true by the data, then don't come back at me with questions where we may not know the answer or where we do, but the data it's a pretty tough question. Let's concentrate on what we know. Yeah. Because here it is in a nutshell. If what we know establishes the truth of Christianity and eternal life, well, as I tell my grad students, ask Paul about this verse. Ask Moses about this verse. Ask Jesus about this verse. But don't ask about your faith, because if the gospel's true and you're on the way to heaven, hey, just take it seriously and calm down a little bit and take your time answering the other questions.
Yeah, it's like every time you were just saying, look, did Jesus rise from the dead?
Over and over that night.
Yeah, it's like, all right, I get it. If Jesus rose, Christianity's true. Even if Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John didn't write, even if there are errors in the Gospels, even if there was some genocide.
Problems I can't explain.
Yeah. So, that really...
But what happened at the very end of the phone call? I mean, you wrote it in the book.
Yeah, it's like, that was a game changer for me, because I understood that if Jesus rose, it's game, set, match.
I love that phrase.
Christianity's true. Period. And I might struggle with some of these other things, but they are secondary and tertiary issues.
But at the end of the phone call, when you were pretty well satisfied, I was like hanging up. And I said, all right, Mike, well, glad we're set. And you go, one more question. Do you remember what you asked?
I don't.
It's in your book. You said, what about Joshua and the people of Israel, which is a very tough question. And I said, Mike, did Jesus rise from the dead? Because to this day, that is a very tough question with Joshua. But if I'm sure of the deity, death, resurrection, a very good verse is Romans 10:9, and it's an early creedal verse, probably from the 30s. But if you believe in your heart that God's raised him from the dead, you're saved. And that's it. So even when you came back with this tough one, which is a tough one for me, I'm saying that's fine for a tough one, but doesn't disprove the gospel faith.
Yeah. Yeah.